We're on Daf Kuf Amid Beis. Today's Daf is Kuf Aleph 101, and we're going to end. We'll finish Kuf Amid Beis 100b. Yesterday we saw the statement of Rami Bar Abba in the name of Ravasi that you're not allowed to walk on grass on Shabbos because you're going to tear it out, and he learns that from the pasuk in Mishlei that Atzbar Aglayim Chote, that if somebody pushes with their feet, they are a sinner. And the Gemara says no, that ultimately the halacha is not that way, since there's no intent, and we follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that any action on Shabbos requires intent, and this is not intentional, and so you would not transgress. So Rabbi Bar Chama said in the name of Rav Asi that actually the pasuk of Atzbar Aglayim is referring to a different prohibition. So V'amar Rami Bar Chama Amar Ravasi. Ravasi said, "Also la'adam sheyichav ishtal dvar mitzvah." That even though having marital relations is a dvar mitzvah, is a matter of mitzvah, depending on also there are particular times that there's an obligation for that. Nevertheless, it is prohibited for a person to have. To compel his wife to have relations. I think that today in the vernacular they call it marital rape. But the idea of relations, even in a married couple, that it has to come from a place of das, as the Gemara is going to tell us, where both want it. Shanemar, as it says, va'atzura beraglayim chote, one who pushes with his feet is a sinner. Amar Bishuba Levi, kol hakofesh ledvar mitzvah. Not only is it a sin, but anybody that pushes his wife or compels his wife for relations, the result is going to be children that are not appropriate. Amar Rav Ika Rav Chanina me'ekra, from which verse do we know this is the end of that verse that says that you're not allowed to, that it's a sin to compel the wife. It says in the pasuk, Gam b'lo-da'as nefesh lo-tov. Also, without knowledge or without das, das is not only knowledge, it means a deep connection. Nefesh lo-tov, the result is a soul that is not good. Tiny namahachi, we have a brisa that concurs with that. Gam b'lo-das nefesh lo-tov, that the end of this verse, which says that without knowledge is a soul that is not good. Zehakofes ishta l'dvar mitzvah. That's somebody who compels his wife to have relations. And pushing, that's a sin with the feet, which is a sin. This is somebody that has relations and then repeats it. Aini, it's not so. Rava said, somebody who wants to have male children should have relations and then relations again. It depends to her desire or not. And as the Rashi points out from the Gemara elsewhere, that whenever somebody can arouse a wife, and if the woman is aroused to the degree that they have a greater desire, then they would have a male son. And so the repeating, according to Rava, is because she is greatly aroused, and having relations after that would result in a male son. But the point of the brisa is that if without her acknowledgement or permission, even if she was okay with having relations a second time after that without her desire, that would also be considered a chote, a sinner. Amar Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmeni, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, or as the text should be, Rabbi Yonasan. Kol isha shetava'as bala dvar mitzvah hava labanim she'afilu b'dorish Moshe lahava kamosen. A woman who, in her desire for relations, expresses that, and the Gemara is going to talk about how that expression comes about, expresses that to her husband, is their children are going to be as great as even in the generation of Moshe, there was no one like that. The Ilu B'Dorish Moshe, because in the generation of Moshe it says, Kasiv, Moshe's father-in-law Yisro gives him advice. Bring for yourselves wise men who are insightful or navonim, v'yeduim l'shiftechem, and they are to each tribe someone is yedua that is known for their great knowledge and understanding. And when it says that Moshe collected these people from each tribe, it says he gathered wise people, v'yeduim, and known people. But he could not find people who were both wise as well as insightful. But Leah, as a result of having come out to Yaakov, when she gave Rachel the dudaim, those flowers that Rachel had asked for, and she came out to Yaakov when Yaakov came home from the field and said to him, Elai Tava Alayla, you're going to come to me tonight. So the result of that, so Leah came out to him, to Yaakov, and said to him, Elai Tava Alayla, you come to me tonight. Because I have leased you or paid for to Rachel to swap it out with the flowers. And as a result of that, it says that she became pregnant and had Yisachar. And later it says in Divrei Hayamim, in Chronicles, where it talks about the children of Binyamin. So it says, of Yisachar. And it says, the children of Yisachar were those that know Bina and understanding, la'itim for their times, ladas mayasa Yisrael, to know what Yisrael should do. Roshehem masayim v'chalacheim alpiyah. Their heads are 200, and all their brethren would go by according to their mouth, meaning by their statements. So you see that as a result of this, they not only had children who were wise, but also insightful, who had bina. Gemara says, Amy, it's not so. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi said, Eser kololos niskal Chava. Chava had 10 curses, and the Chsiv Ela Isha Amar, and this is after the forbidden fruit, the Eitz Hadas, and it says, and to the woman it was said, Harbe Arbe, I will greatly increase your etzbonech, your holding back, your difficulties. So what are the Harbe Arbe? I will many. These are the two forms of blood that come. Blood when the hymen is broken, and blood when of menstruation. Etzbonech, zetzagil is the difficulty of raising children. Veheironech, and pregnancy. Zetzara ibur. This is the pain, the difficulty of the pregnancy itself. And the order, the Marsha asks, why is there? It should say first pregnancy and then raising children. But the point is that even while raising children, there's another pregnancy, and that in and of itself is difficult. Be'etzav te'libanim kamashmo, and the difficulty of the actual birth. Vel ishech teshukasech, and your desire is to your husband. That a woman has a desire to be close to her husband when her husband is going to leave for a trip. And it says, and he will have a control over you. Is that there's a control, that she has a desire, even though that she has a desire, she won't express that desire for him, but the man will express a desire. And and even though that it is part of the curse that she doesn't feel like she wants to express it, even though she has a desire, it says that it is a modesty and a nice midah, a nice attribute. So the Gemara says, you're right. When the Gemara earlier said that Leah Leah showed her desire for a husband, it wasn't through words. She didn't say, "Come upon me," or she didn't say, "Let's lay together." What she said was, "You come to me," meaning to my tent, and that was indicative of what they wanted. So that she will show her desire, but not actually express it verbally. So and that is the part of the natural course, and that's what the Gemara says earlier, that when someone does show her desire for her husband, that is a blessing, and the children will be wise. Hani Sheva Hani. In any case, going back to this statement that Rav Yitzchak said, Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi said, that there were 10 components to the Eitz Hadas for Chava, the 10 components of the curse, but we only mentioned 7. Hani Sheva Haven. There were only 7. Kiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Atufa Kavel. That it used to be that people that were mourners would cover their head as a part of the ituf, part of the mourning process. They would wear a head covering, and in general, a woman wears a head covering, a menuda, mikol adam, and they're also separated from all people. The Gemara is going to ask what that means. And because they are like to be homebound, so that's a form of being locked in. So what does it mean that they are separated from all people? Is it because they're not allowed to be alone with another man? He's also not allowed to be with another woman. So men and women have the same thing. So what does it mean she is separated? But rather the prohibition of polygamy. Monogamy itself is a nidui, a separation from other men. There's a brisa, however, that teaches that she lets her hair grow, and that in and of itself is a difficulty. And that the posture required for a woman to urinate is crouching and sitting, and that's also a difficulty. And that generally in relation she will be on the bottom, and that would be that she takes the weight of her husband. She's like a pillow to her husband. Why didn't the first opinion count that? Because those are actually nice things. Because the crouching is a more respectful, a modest way of going to the bathroom, and in relations it's less difficult if she can lay on her back, so it's more comfortable. So those are actually nicer things. As Rabbi Chia said, what does it mean when it says in the pasuk, "Malafenu mebehemas aretz"? You teach us from the animals of the land, ume'ofa shamayim, and from the birds of the sky, yechakamenu. You also make us wise. So what does this mean? So the Gemara says that the Brisa is saying that this verse is telling us that we actually learn good attributes and behaviors from animals. So malafeinu behema, you teach us from behemas, from animals, and pareda. This is from the modesty of mules, shekarasa mashtanas mayim, that would as opposed to dogs that expose themselves, they crouch down to when they urinate. And from the birds you make us wise. Zetarnagal. This is from the chicken, from the rooster and hen. Shemafayis v'achakach boil. The rooster will spread its wings around the hen before coming on her. So obviously we don't know the relationship and what that means, but we can learn from that to appease and to arouse the woman before coming upon her. Rabbi Yochanan says, even without the Torah teaching us certain things, we would we would learn certain things from animals. Tznius, we would learn modesty, mechatul, from a cat. The cat will cover its, the litter box will cover its litter and it only wants to go in privacy. Tosa says that the animals, the cats also only have relations in private. The gezel minimal, and we learn theft from ants who are constantly working for themselves, bringing their own things and even sharing with the others because they bring it into a colony. Varayas miyona, and separation, a dedication to one's spouse, and separation from other animals, from other partners, from the dove, derech eretz matarnagol, and the care to give to the woman from a tarnagol, from a chicken, shemafayis, that first covers her, so makes her, appeases her, and only thereafter has relations. The Gemara says, so what can we read into the way the rooster spreads his wings around the hen? Amar Yehuda, Amar Rav, and the name of Rabbi says, Hachi Kabbalah, this is what he says to her. He promises her to take care of her. Zavnina lach ziga damatilach ad karich. By spreading the wings around, it says, I'm going to buy you a coat that's going to come around all the way to your legs. Labasa hachi amalei lishamte lekarbalte. Then it seems that the rooster thereafter will stand in front of the chicken and put its head down. So it says, let my crown fall off my head. If I have any money and I don't buy you what I promised you, so then let my crown fall off. In other words, there's a promise for care and a appeasement to take care of her, even though that in the end he cannot fulfill it, but it's a show of love and protection. In any case, these are the things we learn from animals, and all came about from the pasuk used for not walking on grass, which is then used for teaching that you need the permission, even in a marriage, you need permission from the woman to have relations. We go to Kuf Aleph and Aleph at the top of the Mishnah, and this is the going back to our conversation. We were talking about carrying from one domain to another domain, and carrying while standing in one domain to the other. This Mishnah is going to talk about the door that typically was set up at the back of the house, connecting the garden to the wood storage area, or the back part of the house, which wasn't really the back part of the yard, which really wasn't used. And this doorway was only open from time to time. It says 30 days or more, and less than 30 days would count as a proper door. And so this door wasn't really, as opposed to the hinge system that they had back then, which was a peg in the ground and a peg in the doorway. This was really something just laying against the opening in the back. So hadelis, this door, sheba muktzah, that's on the that covers the covers the opening of the backyard. V'chadakim sheba pirtza, and also piles of or bundles of thorns that are in a breach in a wall, and a fence around the back. Umachzoles, or mats that are in the breach. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to put them back into their place, because that's construction. You're adding to the structure of the house. Elim ken gavoya min aretz, unless they are off the ground. If they're off the ground, then it doesn't look like it doesn't look like you're adding to this structure. But if you put it into the doorway itself from the ground into the doorway, it looks like you're adding to the structure. So Gemara says veraminu. We have a contradiction. The Brisa says delis anagreris, that a door that is hanging and touching the ground, umachzelas anagreris, or a mat that's touching the ground, v'kankan anigrer, or a kankan, which is a plow. It's the weight that's behind the plow that would push it down, and then sometimes it's a big piece of wood, so they would put it up as a door. As long as it is hanging at the doorway and so it's tied there and off the ground, so then it looks like a part of the structure already, so it doesn't look like you're adding to the structure. And then you can add it on Shabbos and even on Yontif, and for sure on Yontif. But if not for that, then you can't. So how do you say in our? So you see that the requirement is whether it's hanging or not, but it doesn't make a difference whether it's high off the ground or not. So Abaye says this is talking about that the door itself has a hinge on it. It has the peg that goes into the top of the doorway and the bottom of the doorway. So that really defines it as a door, and so it doesn't look like you're adding to the structure. It already is defined as a door. And Rava Amar b'shohaylem, Rava says even if there is no longer a door, a hinge on it, since it would have had a hinge on it at one point, and you can tell, so therefore it is clearly defined as a door, and it doesn't look like you're adding to the structure. Mesave. So we ask a contradiction. Delas anagreris, amachzelas anagreris, v'karkan anigra bizman shekshurim etulim v'gvayim in haaretz. Like the previous brisa, this one too says that the door and the mat and the plow wood platform, that as long as they are tied and above the ground and hanging and above the ground, so that's an addition. So you see that you do need it above the ground, even a hair's breadth above the ground, then you can use it and put it in as a doorway. If not, you're not allowed to put it in as a doorway. So Abaye Mataran Satamei, Rava Mataran Satamei. So Abaye and Rava both are going to explain according to their opinion interpretation before. Abaye Mataran Satamei, he's explaining Oisha Yesh Lahem Tzir, or if it has a hinge and then you don't need it to be off the ground. And if it does not have a hinge, then or it would be off the ground even if it doesn't have a hinge. And Rava Mataran Satamei Kashay Lahem Tzir, as long as it once had a hinge, or if it currently it does not, and if it never had a hinge, then it would have to be that it's off the ground, and so it shows that it is a door and not a plank of wood that you're putting in. Taner Rabbanan. So the Brisa had taught that soche kotzim, bundles of thorns, v'chavilin, shetkino appeared, so or bundles that were put into a breach in a fence, around the wall of the courtyard. So as long as they are tied and hanging, it's going to be permissible to put them in, to push them back into the breach on Shabbos. And I don't have to tell you in Yontif. Taner Rabachia delas almana anegreres enolimba. A widow door. And the Gemara is going to explain what that means, meaning a door that doesn't look like a door. It looks like an independent piece of wood, so it's called a widow door. You're not allowed to you're not allowed to put it in on Shabbos if it's negreres, if it is touching the ground. Hechidami delas almana. What would define a door this way? Some say that it's a single plank of wood. Their doors were made of several planks with a metal crossbar holding them together. And this is just a single plank of wood. So that doesn't look like a door. That rather looks like a board that you're boarding up the door, the opening. The ikada amri, and then those that say the less begishma. Now, even if it's not a single plank, even if it's multiple pieces of wood, but it doesn't have the typical look of a door where it has a metal bar running across it, holding the pieces together. That too would also count as not looking enough like a door, and putting it in looks like you are sealing up this entryway, and that would be like adding to the structure. And building, adding to the structure is obviously Asan Shabbos. So all this is a toda or either a part of the prohibition, the Torah prohibition of building, or even in the times that it's not building because it's meant to come in and out, but it looks like bona, it looks like it's building. It's one or the other. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hai Madurta. Once we're talking about what looks like construction, the Gemara is going to tell us that many other things cannot be done in a manner that look like construction, where you're going to build the bottom layer and then add to it, but rather it has to be that you put something up above and then slide whatever is going to hold it up from beneath. So making a fire on Yontif, obviously Shabbos you're not allowed to make a fire, but if you're going to make a fire on Yontif, which you're allowed to make a fire on Yontif, you can't build a fire by building the base and then adding wood on top of it, but rather you have to put some logs, and if you want to add, you lift up these logs and put logs beneath it. From above to below, meaning you don't add to the structure above it, but you add below it, that's fine. But from below to above, meaning building it in a systematic way, is prohibited. That doesn't mean that you can't put a log and add to the fire. That you can do, but if you're going to build it and try and make it into a bigger fire, that you have to do, you have to lift up above and slide in beneath it. And also for eggs, they would cook eggs that way over the fire, and they would build layers. So also it would have to be you lift up the upper layer and slide underneath. Similarly for a pot, you would lift the pot and slide the tripod beneath it. They would have these beds that would be a piece of leather, and you'd slide the frame underneath it. So again, on Shabbos and Yontif, you have to do it in that order and not put the frame there and then add the top. And similarly for barrels, if you're going to make barrels and pile them up, so you have to lift the ones that are there and slide beneath it, so it doesn't look like you're doing construction. There was a Sadducee, someone who the original text, it seems, was Mino, which was an early Christian, maybe a Sadducee. They said to Rabbi Shua Hanani, you guys are like thorns. That the good ones are like thorns. Amalei Shatya, he said, fool. Shafel Sefer Dekra. You can't. You're reading half the verse. Read the end of the verse too. Read the end part of that same pasuk. It says, "Yasham Masucha," that it is upright, that is straight, like the house that protects you, like a sukkah, like the roof. So he. So he said to him, so okay, so what does it mean? So what does it mean that they're good ones are like thorns? Just like thorns can stop a breach. So there's a breach in the fence, you put in a bundle of thorns, and that keeps people out. So too, the good amongst us help us protect the breach when there is a breach. Another interpretation. Tovam kechedek, their good ones are like a chedek, but the drash here is going to be that the ches is pronounced like a hey, mehadkin esar shayim, and hedek, it means to break something down very fine, that it breaks down the evildoers leganim. Shenemar, as it says, Kumi v'doshi b'Tzion, get up and thresh, O daughter of Tzion, ki karnech asim barzel, because your horns I will make metal, uparsasayich asim nechusha, and your footsteps will be made out of copper. Vahadikos amim ramim, and you will flatten or break up many nations. So that's the response. And this drash obviously is coming on account of the thorns in the breach of a fence. So we learn that is actually a blessing, that there are people amongst us, the good ones amongst us, to stand up when there is a breach. Going back to the conversation that we had in the previous Mishnayos about carrying from one domain to another, the Mishnah is going to talk about bringing a key to unlock a door in the front of the house or at a garden, and the prohibition of doing that. And we'll see later in the Gemara, it's clear that the way their fences, the way their door locks worked, is there was basically a mechanism. Right now, today we have a mechanism in the door. They had a mechanism in the front of the door, and this mechanism was a large box that had a lock in it. This box was 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, or close to it, and so basically a 12 by 12 inch box, and it was more than 10 tefachim off the ground, which then defined it as a private domain. And they wouldn't carry the key around, but rather they would leave the key somewhere hidden around the locked door, and so they would have to retrieve the key from wherever it was hidden and then put it into the box and unlock it. Now, the box being a private domain, and they're standing in the public domain and taking the key from there, so they are taking something while they're in a public domain. They're taking something from the public domain and inserting it into the private domain, the box itself, the lock box, in order to open the door. So a person may not stand in the private domain and unlock the door that's in the public domain, or stand in the public domain or vice versa, standing in the public domain and opening the door that's in the private domain. Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says he must make a fence around the doorway, like an entryway that's 10 tefachim high, that would then define even the area in front of the door as a private domain. And this way he can move the key and insert it into the lock and open it. So they said to him, well, what about the story of the in the marketplace of Yerushalayim, in the marketplace of spice makers or of butchers? They would lock the door and leave the key in the window, that was above the door, and they would open it from there. And Rabbi Yossi says actually it wasn't the butchers, it was the wool makers. But either way, what about that? There they took the key and they would open the door, and the Gemara is going to address that. So Rabbanan Amar, and the Rabbanan, what do they say? Amar Rabbi Meir Rishus Harabim. The Rabbanan are responding to Rabbi Meir, who Rabbi Meir said you can't stand in the public domain and use a key and insert the key and open it in a private domain. Yet the Rabbanan Mahadri Le Carmelis, Inu Carmelis, and they respond about Yerushalayim. But Yerushalayim is not a public domain. Yerushalayim was a Carmelis. Why? The Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Bar Bachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan being the head of the academy in Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, the city of Yerushalayim, if not for its doors being locked every night, closed every night, Yerushalayim would be the classic public domain. Its its street went straight through the city from one entry wall to the other, from one entryway to the other. It was 16 amas wide. It serviced 600,000 people. It was the whole of Am Yisrael, right? The large community, and so it was the quintessential public domain on a Torah level. Besides for that, its doors were closed every night or in the wall around the city, and so therefore it no longer, even though it had all of the qualifications, but the closing of the door turned it into a private domain. And so, obviously, even though that is a private domain, halachically, on a Torah level, but the Chachamim said, look, it acts and feels and looks like a public domain, so it's going to have the halacha of a carmelis, this in-between space, not private, because it services, it's a public right of way, but it's also not public because it has the doors that close, which are all of the halachas that we've seen about this in-between space, the carmelis, the rabbinic public way. So Rabbi Meir says you can't stand in Rosh Hashanah in a Torah level public way and put your key into a private Rosh Hashanah into a Torah level private space, and now and the Chachamim respond, oh well, what about in Yerushalayim? Yeah, that's not a public space on a Torah level. That's a rabbinic public way. Amar of Papa, or so Rabba or Papa respond, Kan Kodim Shenifritz appears. Rabbi Yochanan's statement was when Yerushalayim was still, the walls had not been breached. It was still completely enclosed by the walls and doors. Kan La'ach Shenifritz appears. But after Yerushalayim was already breached, the Romans had broken the walls, and therefore the city was no longer a private domain on a Torah level and a rabbinic public way, but actually was back to being a proper Rishus Harabim. And in that case is what our Mishnah is saying, that story happened in the day of Rabbi Yossi or the Chachamim or Rabbi Meir. Rava Amar, however, Rava says Seifa Asan L'Sha'arei Gina. No, that the Brisa is actually talking about even, and Rabbi Meir is talking about even in a Sha'arei Gina, in a garden doorway, which is going to be in a carmelis, because it's not a public way. Obviously, the gardens were in the back of the houses in the little homesteads, and those fences are going to be in a carmelis and still a rabbinic public way, and still Rabbi Meir says you're not allowed to unlock the door. And this is what the Mishnah means to say. And just as you're not allowed to open the door from a public way to a private way, vice versa, by bringing the key. Similarly, Rabbi Meir says, similarly, you should not stand in a private, in a rabbinic public way, which is a carmelis, and open the door in a private way, or a private space, or vice versa. So to that, Rabbi Meir says you're also going to need a 10 tefachim fence in order to make even the area in front of the door a reshus hayachid, a private property, a private domain, in order to be allowed to put the key into the lock and open it. Now we go to 101b, Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. Elam kein asa mechitza gevei asara, unless he actually made a fence that's 10 tefachim high. And to that the Chachamim said to him, what about the story in Yerushalayim? They would lock the door and put the key on the window. Pesach over the door. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi says, actually, it wasn't the butcher, it was market, it was the wool maker's market. In any case, we see that Rabbi Meir disagrees not only on a Torah level public way, but even a rabbinic public way. You cannot put the key into a reshus hayachid and open the door. Tana Rabban. So the Brisa taught Pischei Sha'arei Gina, the openings of gardens, of the doorways of the gardens. Bizman she'esh lam be'sha'ar, as long as it has an entryway as well, so it has a room, essentially, a foyer, or some sort of opening, some sort of enclosure in front of the fence. If that's on the inner side of the garden, so then you're allowed to open and lock the door from the inner side of the garden because there's actually a private domain there that you're allowed to put the key into the lockbox. If it's on the outside, this entryway, so then you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to insert the key on the outside of the garden. Mikana, if there's a foyer, this entryway enclosure on both sides, you can do it on both sides. You can lock and unlock the door on both sides. But if the door is just a fence door and doesn't actually have an enclosure around the opening on either side, so it'll be prohibited to put the key into the lockbox, which is going to be a private domain, from this rabbinic public space, both on the inside and the outside. Similarly, shops that are open to a public, a Torah level public right away, a public space. If the lockbox is the lock itself is less than 10 tefachim from the ground, maybe maftech me'erev Shabbos and menicha b'eskufa, so you can take a key and put it in the doorway before Shabbos, because the lockbox itself is within 10 tefachim of the ground, so it's not going to be a private domain. And the next day you can unlock it and lock it there, and put the key back into the doorway. However, if the lock is above 10 tefachim, maybe then you have to insert the key already into the lockbox, which is a private domain, before Shabbos, and leave the key in there. And the next day, on Shabbos, you can unlock and lock the door, but you have to leave it in its place. Rabbi Meir. And the Chachamim disagree and say even when the lock itself, which as we saw it is a 4x4 space and it's 10 tefachim above the ground, nevertheless, maybe maftech me'erev Shabbos and menicha b'askufa, you're allowed to put the key in the doorway. You're allowed to insert the key into that private domain while you're standing in the public domain, unlock the door and put the key back into the doorway, or in the window above the door. However, if the window itself is a 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, you're not allowed to put it there. Because you're carrying from the public domain into the private domain, the windowsill itself being a private domain. Tomorrow we'll continue with addressing this brisa that talks about Rabbi Meir saying not inserting the key into the lockbox, and it has to be in there before Shabbos, and the Chachamim saying you're allowed to. What those scenarios are, and we'll see what the machlokes is based upon.